Hey guys, I've been hearing a lot in the dev sphere about AI taking our jobs. Now, obviously, this is not true, but there's a lot of misinformation out there, so I felt the need to address this. First of all, big companies are saying that AI will be replacing our jobs as developers. Now, this isn't true because they're just trying to increase their shareholder price. On top of that, we also have a lot of big platforms like YouTubers who are claiming that AI is going to replace us. This also isn't true. They're just trying to increase your anxiety, which increases their watch time and retention on their videos and makes them more money. The truth about AI, I think, is really quite simple, but it's just being spun up in a lot of different narratives. So I'm just going to explain it very quickly, and hopefully by the end of this video, it'll quell all of your anxiety. So the first thing you have to consider is that AI cannot actually understand the full scope of a project. As you can see on the diagram over here, you'll see that I've drawn an X, a check mark, and another X. This represents the full scope of the project. AI is excellent at writing this stage right here, which I call the production stage, but it is terrible at the pre-production and post-production stage of a project. Essentially, what that means is that AI is really good at writing code. In fact, I'd argue that it probably outputs better code than most senior developers. But the reason that AI is not a senior developer and is actually worse than even a mid-level developer is that there's a lot more to coding than just writing code. As a developer, you actually have to work with clients, you have to work with your boss, your management, your coworkers. You have to account for time management and if something is worth investing your time into. You have to also work on multiple projects at the same time, all of which differentiate a mid-level and senior developer programmer from AI. So as you can see in the diagram that I've drawn, there's a check mark here. This is where AI excels at. It is writing the code stage. AI can do this perfectly, very well, with minimal mistakes, far better than any developer out there. But if you account for the fact that you also have to do the pre-production stage where you have to talk with your management. You have to figure out what exactly is going into the project, how you want to do it, how you want to tackle it, how much time you have on it. And then, of course, the post-production stage where you're working with the client to figure out if this is what they want. You have to work with the revisions. You have to work with what they actually want versus what they said at the beginning and what they actually end up thinking they really want in the end product and all that stuff. AI is not very good at dealing with those stages. And funnily enough, those might be the other 50% of your workplace. If you've ever worked in an office before, you'll know that writing code is only about half of what you do in the development workspace. The other half is actually doing everything I said earlier, such as doing businesses, meetings, and actually talking with others to figure out how you want to do something. So because of that, AI is just not ever going to be good at replacing the developer in the full scope of everything when you account for the full entire project. So because of that, it's not going to happen anytime soon. I think that AI is not going to be able to replace a developer in the full sense. Maybe a junior developer, but that would probably be the limit of what they can do. Now, I know that you could technically say that if you gave AI access to everything in the project, maybe it could replace the full entire process and take care of everything. But the problem is that that requires a large amount of resources and money to actually do properly and effectively. And the ROI, I think, is just not worth it when you can just hire a real developer. And that brings me to the second reason why, which ties into this, is that companies are just not as tech savvy as you think they are. One of the things you have to understand about companies is that they will usually end up picking up less optimal paths because, one, they're not aware of the latest technology like you think they are. We are knowledgeable nerds. They are not knowledgeable nerds. They don't understand exactly what goes on in the web development sphere. On top of that, there's a level of human connection and trust they would rather have and pick over an AI or artificial intelligence. If you ever watched a YouTube video or seen an ad that was made in AI, you'll know immediately that it's a lot less appealing than just watching a normal human like me talk to you as a camera. If I were an AI artificial intelligence, would you really be watching this video and taking my word for word, or would you be feeling a sense of distrust or disconnect? That is the exact same thing with small companies and employees. They would rather have a real human do this than AI because it's just a subconscious thing of trust and having a real human connection. On top of that, companies won't usually be aware of the latest technology. For example, someone in like a local butcher shop, like a small butcher shop, who might not even use modern technology, might have no idea that Grok Heavy 4 or, Cursor or something like that exists. And they might just be using base model GPT. Now, obviously, base model GPT is going to be worse than even what OpenAI has to offer. On top of that, it is not going to be very good. It's going to be limited. They really don't know what they're doing. To them, this is revolutionary technology, and it's going to take a while for them to catch on. And even if they do catch on, I highly doubt that they would really go into it, all the specifications and details, because they'd rather just hire someone else to do that because they have so much more to worry about than AI. Third thing you have to understand is that AI will never be 100% perfect. If you can see from the graph I've drawn over here, AI is never really perfect. We don't know what goes on inside it, so there's always a small risk or a small margin of error of it messing up and causing a problem. And for companies, this is especially a bad issue because they have a lot of important stuff that happens internally that is a huge risk if something were to go wrong and get either leaked, either compromised, or anything like that. So because of that, it is better to hire a real human because while a real human, you could argue, is still susceptible to the exact same things AI is, they have a level of responsibility, they have a level of understanding their own limitations, and they have a level of risk taken that they are willing to do to make sure that they also mess up. Another thing to note is that if you've ever seen an automation line like a factory line, you'll know that even for something that should be fully 100% automated, something like a car factory line, that there's still at least one or two humans watching over from above. Just a little eye I drew over here. Even if something is automated, literally the word automation comes from a factory. Even for something that is literally the definition of the word automation, there is still always a level of having someone watch over to make sure that it is perfect and there's no chance of risk. So because of that, it is basically always guaranteed there will be a job. The fourth thing to know is that AI could actually be camping out already. If you've noticed in the recent years with OpenAI, their models have been steadily getting worse and worse in improvements over time. For example, GPT-4 and 4.5 was such a marginal difference that even I, who had access to OpenAI subscription, didn't even use 4.5 because I just thought it wasn't worth it for its slower speed and really not that great of an improvement overall in general. In fact, I'd argue there was nothing visible or notable about the newest model. On top of that, there's always going to be bad data funneled to AI as well. If you're aware of the AI image generation space, you can see in this image right here, this is what we call nightshade. They were essentially images that look almost right, but are slightly altered and so are corrupting basically the huge data set that AI has. And there's no way to really tell or filter these out because they look almost perfect. And so because of that, it's going to seem like this is exactly what it's meant to be. And so that means that no matter how good AI gets, it will never be able to fully be perfected without stuff like this also happening or being filled into the data set. And obviously, as well as that, the fact that the internet hasn't existed for so long means that there's not that much data to actually feed on in the first place. That's high quality to begin with. Because a lot of coding out there is not actually by senior devs, it's by junior devs. And so to actually get the high quality senior dev, there's not actually that much out there. And so AI cannot really train on really good quality data. And so it usually has to train on lower quality, meaning that it's not going to be perfected very easily. And it just overall, the cost and the investment and the resources needed to get AI to a really good level is just getting more and more expensive. It's getting exponential, and the return is getting less and less noticeable. And by the way, companies will never talk about this because it's bad for shareholders. If they admitted that their AI is getting worse and worse and improving, then they're going to lose billions of dollars. So they keep on pretending like the AI is going to get close to like AGI or it's going to eventually take over and become self-aware. It's never happening. I think honestly, in my opinion, AI is reaching its limits, and in 5-10 years, the AI bubble will burst and people realize it's not actually as good as it seems and will be stuck with whatever it has right now. Fifth thing you need to know is that companies usually insist on less than optimal paths for their own purposes and reasons. As you can see right here, there are 3 teams that feed into a single output, and this is very similar and mimics what a real workplace is like. You'll know that if you ever worked with a company that has multiple teams working on the same project, you'll know there's multiple different clashes of interests and how they want to do things. For example, the sales team might want a pop-up on the page that essentially tells the viewer to click on this or give them an email address so they can get more funneled into their whatever they're selling really, and they can get more revenue. Now obviously you as a knowledgeable web developer know that this is really bad for bounce rates because it essentially kicks off a lot of users who lose interest immediately by getting flashbanged by a pop-up. The problem is that these are 2 conflicts of interest. One side wants to make money, the other side wants to keep viewers on the page, and so you're going to have issues like that need to be mitigated and resolved or find a middle ground in between that. AI is really bad at working with that because it's always going to do exactly what it's prompted to do, or if it doesn't do that, it's going to be heavily biased to whoever is prompting it. In the end, it's just going to be better to hire a human to take care of that because, as you know, if you replace one of the teams with AI, even if it does seem good on paper, it's just going to cause a lot of issues. And if you ever worked in an office, you know that working with humans already can be difficult because, there's always miscommunication, there's always conflict of interest, and AI just being thrown into that is just going to cause a whole lot of other issues that I think, honestly, most companies will opt out of. Sixth and final point is that the dev sphere is constantly changing and AI is trained on past data. If you ever use the npm install script, you will know that usually you just pull that off a website's or the library's web page or the actual npm site, and it's usually the first thing you have to do to actually access the entire library. It's actually the most important step because that's literally downloads the library to your project. Now the problem that I ran into when I was using npm is that GPT, the one I use, was constantly giving me a legacy version of the installation script. And usually this was fine, but every now and then one of them just wouldn't work and I'd get the wrong installation line and I would have an issue. Now me as a developer did not have an issue with this because I could just search up the library's website and find the real or the current npm install line. But if an entire AI were to take over the process and it had the exact same issue, as you can imagine, it's gonna install npm X and it's not going to work and the entire site is going to break. Now for me, this was an issue because I could just fix it and get the actual rest of the code the GPT produced, which is actually good. Whatever I asked it for, from what I remember, other than the npm install line being wrong, everything else is actually flawless and actually worked perfectly. But an AI, if it breaks on the first line, it's going to break the entire workflow. And that's just going to be bad overall for the company. It's going to be bad for workflow. It's going to be bad for everyone. So that's already a problem in itself. On top of that, AI has a cutoff point because AI is very good at using legacy code over modern code. As you all know, there was a recent vulnerability in Next.js, which was a 9.1 critical. I don't know too much about that. I just know that I had to update my version and get it fixed, but AI is not going to be very well aware of that unless it is purposely injected into its knowledge, which I think for this one, because it was such a huge vulnerability, I think GPT is somehow aware of that. I don't know what goes on in OpenAI's backend. They're doing something out there, those engineers. But I do know that a lot of the smaller vulnerabilities AI might not be aware of. And so because of that, it can include those vulnerabilities even after it was patched, because a real developer keeps up with stuff, AI cannot really keep up with stuff in the same degree. On top of that, AI is also going to write legacy code because AI is trained on the largest data set it has, and usually for newer technology, if it had an older version, AI is going to have a lot more training on the older version over the new one, and so it's going to opt to use the old version. Because of that, it might use code that is basically legacy, which usually is supported by a lot of stuff, but some stuff doesn't support its own legacy version, and so it's going to break. Because of that, you're always going to get code that is to a degree slightly outdated or slightly old, and if there's any new tools that came out within the last year, it's probably going to be beyond the knowledge point that AI is cut off at, and so it's not going to be aware to the AI. Those are the big reasons. There are some smaller ones, but hopefully that's all you need to know to care about. That's it for this video. If you want to join my online community, where me and my team help devs land their first job, there's a link in the description. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next video.